Welcome to College Smart Radio, helping you bring into focus the true cost of college and how to tackle the runaway cost of financing a college education. College Smart Radio is hosted by Beatrice Schultz, a certified financial planner and founder of Westface College Planning. Now, here's your host for College Smart Radio, Beatrice Schultz.
Hi, I'm Beatrice Schultz. Welcome to our weekly show, College Smart Radio, where we help you tackle the runaway costs of a college education. Our show is all about bringing up-to-date and practical advice to parents who are dealing with the cost of a college education for their kids, with private schools costing up to $60,000 a year, a UC costing close to $35,000, and a California State University running $25,000 a year. Parents need more help than ever. We bring you that help by sharing ways to pay less, tapping into financial aid, and prioritizing your source of funds to make sure you get through the most expensive years of your life. Based on my own education and experience, I share my insights with you week in and week out. I hold a Bachelor of Science degree in Chemical Engineering and a Master's degree in International Business. I am a certified financial planner and the owner of the San Carlos-based college planning business, Westface College Planning. We host workshops on college planning and consult with parents on a daily basis. In addition to my insights, I bring in experts to the College Smart Radio show in many areas of the college process, from counselors, financial aid officers, student coaches, parents, and even students. You'll learn firsthand the ins and outs of how to pay for college and survive financially. In addition to our show, you can also find lots of powerful information at our website, collegesmartradio.com. We have many articles that I've authored with up-to-date information on navigating the waters of paying for the runaway cost of college. We have a monthly e-newsletter full of content about college planning, and we also have posted a glossary of key terms used in the world of college planning. Terms like total cost of attendance, FAFSA, 529, student assets, and so forth. And we have a link to our free community parent workshops and webinars that we host to teach parents how to pay for college and how the financial aid system really works. So let's get into today's show. 529 plans are most often the go-to savings plans for families to save for college. So naturally, 529 plans discussion have often been a part of our College Smart Radio shows. We've discussed traditional 529 plans as part of our two-part Where Should I Be Saving for College programs, and I've also dedicated an entire show to a non-state-sponsored prepaid tuition 529 plan. And if you're interested in listening to any of these shows, they're available on podcast, and the links can be found on College Smart Radio website under the Archives tabs. You can also find them and listen to them on your smartphone via the Spreaker app. Just download the Spreaker app, that's Spreaker, and search for College Smart Radio episodes, and you can listen to them in your car. Many of our listeners send in comments and questions asking for a better understanding of 529 plans. So I thought it was worth dedicating a show specifically to talk about 529 plans. Joining me in the studio today to discuss 529 plans is Mark Guthrie. I'm a CFP and a licensed insurance professional, but when a part of a plan of action includes any investment decisions, I always like to include a securities license expert. And Mark is a registered representative with the Owen Equity Sales Company, a member of FINRA IPC, and so he is a securities expert. Mark has been a guest on a few of my shows, so many of you know him as my partner at Westface Financial and Insurance Service and my husband. Hi, Mark. Welcome to College Smart Radio.
Thanks. Happy to be here and happy to be talking about 529s.
Hey, thanks for joining us, Mark. So let's talk a little bit, just for a lot of people don't even understand what it means, like a 529 plan. Some people call it an account. Some people think it's a specific type of investment. What's the history of the 529 plan?
Sure. Well, like a lot of plans that we have, these numbers come from very obscure places. The 529 plan was first created by Congress in 1996, and it was actually didn't have anything to do with college. It was wrapped up in a Small Business Job Protection Act, and the law basically was later refined in 1997 by a Taxpayer Relief Act, in 2001 again, and then 2006 it was also changed by the Pension Protection Act. So basically, in this short period of time, the 529 has emerged as one of the top ways to save for college. And if you think about it, back in 1996, kids were just being born then that are now getting ready to go to college. So these 529 plans, while it feels like maybe we've been talking about them and they've been around forever, they are, in fact, relatively new. And as a result of that, there is still a lot of data coming in about how these plans have performed over time, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So the history of these plans is that the federal government enacted just about 17 years ago these 529 plans and created a vehicle that provided tax protection and tax benefits for families to be able to save for college as effective as they can.
I would say that of the families that come in and that I'm talking to, probably 20% of them or 25% of them have some money that they've saved in a 529 plan. So I'm guessing that a lot of our listeners have either heard of a 529 plan or have some amount of money in a 529 plan. So, good or bad, it's something that has been kind of on the radar of, hey, if you're going to save for college, this is one plan that you could use.
Sure. Well, let's just talk a little bit of facts, because a lot of people say, well, I want to do it, or I don't want to do it because that's what everybody else is doing, or I keep reading they're good, or I keep reading they're bad. I always like to look at the actual statistics. So right now, there are over 106 different types of 529 plans. And while the federal government enacted the law, it's actually created and implemented by states. So other than one private prepaid plan, which you talked about on a prior show, all other prepaid plans, advisor plans, and direct 529 plans are run by the states, and there's over 100 of them. As a matter of fact, the majority of them are individual investment accounts. There's about 95 of those and only about 11 prepaid plans. So there's a lot of plans out there. There are right now 12 million 529 plans on the books. Now, there might be one or two per family, but it's typically one per family. So right now in America, there are 12 million plans out there, and that's growing. Matter of fact, 18 months, and this statistic was as of June of last year, 18 months prior to that, there were only 10 million plans. So these plans are popular, and they're growing.
So are they good? Is it good to get involved in a 529 plan? And actually, even before you answer that question, Mark, let's talk about, when you talk about the state sponsoring or running these plans, what does that mean? What's the state's participation in a 529 plan?
Sure. Basically, states create the administration for the 529 plans, which means they create the rules, the fee structures, and then they almost always hire a third-party firm, financial firm, to actually manage the investments and manage the interaction with the clients. So, for example, you'll see many plans that have large mutual fund companies behind them, like a Franklin Templeton or a Fidelity or a T. Rowe Price. But these are created by states. They're not that different from state to state, but the differences are interesting if you look at them, and they are interesting to know, so you can really tailor whatever plan you want for yourself.
I think that the fact, just for our audience to understand, is you don't need to, as a California resident, purchase a California plan at all.
Sure, and we'll get into the rules a little bit, but I want to stick to the facts just for a minute. So as I said, there's 12 million plans out there right now. The average account size per plan is $16,000. So it's not a lot of money. Obviously, we hope that a lot of these plans are for people that were born in the last 5 years, and they're ramping up. Obviously, if you're getting ready to go to college today and you've got $16,000 in a 529 plan, it's not nearly going to be enough to even pay for your first half of tuition. But what that means is there are over $180 billion invested in 529 plans right now. And I always wonder what people are doing inside their plans, investment-wise, because for the most part, people choose between stocks or mutual funds around stocks and mutual funds around bonds. And if you look at the growth in the first half of 2012, the value of those dollars grew 8.6%. Now, statistics show that about half of that growth was through a combination of new contributions and withdrawals, money in, money out. The other half was actual investment returns. So if you look at the funds in 2012, the first half of 2012, in mass, they had about a 4% rate of return, which is kind of interesting because, one, if you look at the stock performance in the first half of last year, the S&P index is an indicator of that, it was up about 9.5%. If you look at the Barclays Capital Bond Index, it was up about 3%. So it's not surprising, but if we're seeing an average 4% rate of return, it's probably pretty safe to assume that most people have some kind of a 50-50, 60-40 split between their equities and their bonds inside these funds.
And well, we haven't really talked a little bit about what the options are, but people can choose to put whatever combination of investments they want to have in there. But although there are some package type of investments that they can choose based on the age of the student.
Yeah, sure. I just want to let people know that these funds are very popular. Lots of families have them. 12 million, as a matter of fact, have them. People are putting money into them. They're growing, and there's significant amount of assets inside these plans, $180 billion. So that's just a little bit of a backdrop of where this number, the 529, came from. Our friends at the federal government. It's actually an IRS code. The fact that the states implement these plans. There's basically about 2 plans per state. One is a direct plan, and the other is an advisor plan. And we're going to talk about those in a minute.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about what's the difference between a direct plan and an advisor plan.
Well, the main difference is that a direct plan, a consumer goes into the plan and actually manages it themselves. They manage the selection of the investments. They manage the paperwork to get the money either coming in via checks or from a direct deposit from their checking account. And it's completely up to a consumer to manage that entire process. An advisor plan functions similar. It's just that the advisor actually manages the mechanics of the plan. So the advisor is going to be providing advice to the consumer in the process about which plan they might want to consider for their situation, what investment scenario they might want to consider, and be able to talk to the consumer about how the investments mix and match with the rest of what they're doing with their money. Remember, any investment is an island, and yet it's not. Most families have multiple investments across 401ks, equity in their real estate, brokerage accounts, 529 plans. And if a family is managing that across the entire spectrum, then the risk will all make sense across everything. If you look at them all in isolation, you can get some funny results. So that's the difference between a direct and an advisor plan.
Hey, Mark, let's take a break right now. You're with us on College Smart Radio on AM 1220 KDOW. My guest today is Mark Guthrie, my partner at Westface Financial, and we're discussing 529 plans. Stay tuned. We'll be right back on College Smart Radio.
For more information on today's topic, visit collegesmartradio.com or call area code 650-587-1559. College Smart Radio continues in moments on AM 1220 KDOW. Contact Beatrice Schultz at collegesmartradio.com or call area code 650-587-1559. Now, back to College Smart Radio with your host Beatrice Schultz on AM 1220 KDOW.
Welcome back to College Smart Radio, where we help you tackle the runaway costs of college. You're with us on AM 1220 KDOW. I'm Beatrice Schultz. I'm talking with my guest Mark Guthrie about 529 plans. Mark, we've been talking about 529 plans. Maybe you can share with us the pros and cons of using a 529 plan to accumulate your money to pay and fund for college.
Sure, absolutely. Be happy to. Number one is federal and state tax-deferred growth. If you're going to be saving money for the future, you really have 3 options to do it. One is you pay your tax at work, you bring the money home, and then every year you pay tax on your earnings. Very punishing to trying to accumulate money over time. The other 2 options actually do the same thing, which is you pay the money at work, you pay the tax to bring the money home, and then you grow the money either tax deferred, meaning you don't pay taxes until later, or tax free. So these 529 plans defer the growth. And as long as you spend the money on college expenses, it is ultimately going to be tax-free. So first and foremost is a very favorable tax treatment, both federally and in the state of California, which, as we know, given recent propositions, California state income tax is now quite significant. So it needs to be factored into any investment decision. So that's number one, which is the tax favorability. Number 2 is federal gift tax. The 529 contributions are basically happening inside the Federal Gift Act. So you can contribute in 2013 up to $14,000 per person, per recipient, for 529 contributions without triggering any federal gift tax. As a matter of fact, you can even do an accelerated up to 5 years at once contribution. Used to be $65,000, now it'll be $70,000 into a 529 plan. So you are gifting money to your kids, but it is not going to be triggered as a gift under the federal gift tax. Third is federal estate tax treatment. Now, we just had legislation that says our new estate tax is $5 million and change, depending upon how you do the math. So that may or may not be a consideration for your family. But if you are acquiring a fair amount of money in 529 plans for your kids and something were to happen to you, that money is deemed to have left your estate. So it would not be taxed in your overall estate tax, which can be a consideration for some folks. High contribution limits. You know, there's lots of tax preferred plans out there, but it's hard to get money into them. 401k, you've got limits at work. An IRA, you have limits. You've got phase outs. 529 plans are not limited very much. As a matter of fact, depending upon the state, and the state sets the limits for their own plans, I've seen them as low as $250,000 and as high as $500,000 contribution to each plan. So that's quite a bit of headroom to take advantage of these plans.
And we need that headroom, although we often don't recommend that a family has 100% of their college funds in a 529. But if a 529 fits for your family's financial profile, to be able to have some money there, if you're thinking about private colleges at $60,000 a year, you might be hitting close to that $200,000 or $300,000 limit.
Sure, yeah, a couple of kids going to private school, you can get there in a hurry. So the other advantages of a 529 plan or 529 plans are absolutely choice of investment. It's often listed as a con, but I think it's more of a pro than a con. There are many plans out there that not only have year-based funds or age-based funds, which means the fund manages the portfolio allocation over time from a relatively high equity position early in a child's life to, as they get closer to college, shifting to more fixed income for predictability. But you also have many funds who have plans that have 15, 20 funds where you can really micromanage what exposures you want your money to through picking various combinations of funds. And either you can do that yourself in a direct plan or an advisor can do that for you in an advisor plan. You can also move these plans around. You can roll over plans. So let's say you get started in a particular state, in Alabama, for example, and 5 years down the road, the state's changed some of their rules, some fund managers change, and you now think Illinois is the best plan. No problem. You have portability of the plans from state to state. You don't have to put your money in one state plan early and then have it stuck there. So that's pretty good. Simplicity. It is really easy to open a 529 plan. I mean, it is as easy as opening a checking account, maybe even easier. And the contributions to them are also incredibly easy. There's many employers who actually even have the ability at work to be able to take money straight from your paycheck and fund a 529. So it's very good. And innovation. When we first started with 529 plans back in 1996, they weren't particularly creative. They were kind of one size fits all. There weren't very many of them. States were using pretty much a fixed income approach to investment. But now we've got a lot more variety in what states are allowing in terms of the investment options inside the funds. And I think it will continue to be innovated as we move forward. But, it's not all positives.
So there's some cons out there you're going to share with us?
Boy, there's always cons. That's why they always say pros and cons. Rarely do you say there's pros and then you hear silence. Always some cons. So here's some cons. If you don't use the money for college, you, of course, will owe the income tax on the gains. Now, that's not good, but it's not terrible. You probably would have done that anyway, so at least you had some deferred growth. The big con, though, is that you will pay a 10% penalty on those earnings coming out in addition to the income tax. So that's a heavy price tag for trying to use a tax-preferred method, deciding that you can't use it or use all of it. You've got to pay a 10% penalty. The other big con, of course, in my opinion, is your money's going to be locked up in these plans pretty much from when you start to when the kids go through school. So depending upon where you're saving for the rest of your life's expenditures, if this is a 20-25% of your overall savings plan type of number for you, and you've got the other savings plan tied up in 401ks and home equity, you might have a lot of money saved up in 5 or 7 or 10 years. But if something comes along where you need some money, you won't have very easy access, or at least tax penalty-free access to most of your money. So I always look at 529 plans as part of the overall savings plan, the overall tax plan, and of course the overall accessibility to your money. Because we all know life throws all kinds of curveballs at us, and if we have a big expense, we've got to replace something in our life, a car, we've got some medical expenses, and we've got lots of money but none of it available, we're going to go borrow it, and at a relatively high interest rate. So we need to make sure that we not only understand these plans in isolation, but in coordination to everything else that we're doing. And one that I hear you talk a lot about, which is these plans are financially aid visible. And maybe you can share with parents what that means.
Well, I can, and if you have a college-bound student, saving for college is going to be really important, and you're going to want to review the archives that Mark and I did on the different methods of savings for college, because we talked about this access issues being a big deal, but also financial aid. So any money that you have in a 529 plan will be considered a parent asset for qualification of financial aid. So it's in between when we talk about financial aid. It's not an invisible asset that doesn't show up on the financial aid app calculation, and it's not as heavily weighted as a child-owned asset such as an UTMA type account. So the 529, in part of your planning, if your family will qualify for financial aid, and we have some other shows that talk about how you can determine that, then you're going to want to really consider, is the 529 plan the right choice for your family?
Yep. So those are some of the cons. Now, moving on to the 3 types of plans. We want to talk about this. Prepaid plans. That sounds pretty good. I like the idea of being able to prepay anything and have somebody guarantee that if the price goes up, no problem, you've prepaid it. The good news is there's a few out there. The bad news is there aren't really any in California. California itself as a state does not have a prepaid plan. There is a private prepaid plan that's made up of 127 universities that you talked about in one of your other shows. And there are about a dozen of those schools in California. So that might be an option for somebody living here in California to think about that plan. And obviously you'd have to consider the ramifications if your child decided not to go to one of those schools, but to another one. You don't lose everything, but you might lose a little. It gets a little complicated. But just for general interest, there are some states out there that have some prepaid plans. Now, when states do these, of course, they take on the risk. So if you're going to pay $1 today and the state's going to guarantee that that'll buy you a unit in the future, you've got to make sure that what you're paying makes sense. And I've looked at them. There's some states that charge a tremendous premium in terms of what they expect the cost of college is going to be. And there's some that are just unbelievably great. Like in the state of Texas, you can literally pay $1 today for a 9th grader and have that translate to $1 of college credit when the child goes to school 5-6 years down the road. So very powerful. So those are prepaid plans. And on the advisor plans, I'll just mention this really quickly. With over 100 different plans out there, you either need to set aside a fair amount of time to look at those or contact an advisor who's got experience. Now, the knock on the advisor plans is almost always that the fees are higher, and they are. So you need to make sure that you're getting value for those fees and know that of all the funds out there, the largest funds are actually advisor funds. So there's lots of people that are using advisors for their funds, and there are also lots of people, it's about 50-50, that use advisors, dollars that come in through advisors, and dollars that are direct. So that's a personal decision you need to make.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Thank you so much for your insight on the 529 plans and the pros and cons. Thanks so much for being on College Smart Radio. I can't believe our half hour is already over.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, that wraps up another weekly show of College Smart Radio. Remember, any money in a 529 plan, either prepaid or not, will count as a parent asset in the financial aid calculation for the FAFSA and the CSS Profile. We hope you picked up some new information today that helps you figure out ways to manage the runaway costs of college. You can hear us each week here on KDOW 1220 AM. This is Beatrice Schultz. Thanks for tuning in to College Smart Radio. We look forward to sharing more helpful information with you next week.
Information presented during today's show is not to be construed as advice meeting the particular needs of any investor. All mention of performance is based on historical experience. It should not be assumed that past performance is any indication of future results. Tax and or legal advice is not offered by Mark Guthrie. Please consult with your tax professional for additional guidance regarding tax-related matters. Mark Guthrie is a registered representative with the ON Equity Sales Company, member FINRA SIPC, and an independent advisor representative through the ON Investment Management Company. Mark Guthrie is also licensed to offer insurance and annuities in California, Oregon, Nevada, and Connecticut. Beatrice Schultz is not affiliated with the ON Equity Sales Company. You've been listening to College Smart Radio with certified financial planner Beatrice Schultz. If you have questions on today's topic, log on to collegesmartradio.com or call area code 650-587-1559. That's 650-587-1559. Join us next week at this time for another edition of College Smart Radio on AM 1220 KDOW.